Hi, my name is Mon, and this is my data analysis project on the show and the movie Fargo. In this video, I'm going to talk about each of the 5 current seasons of the TV show, as well as the 1996 movie. As I'm recording this, season 5 aired about 6 months ago, and there hasn't been anything, like any news that I've seen about whether or not there is going to be a season 6, but I also haven't seen anything saying there isn't going to be a season 6. In this video, I'm going to go through each season individually and tell you all the data I recorded for each season. If you haven't seen one of the seasons and you don't want spoilers, I will put a timestamp in the description or in the comments somewhere, and you can just click on that and avoid spoilers. Otherwise, there will be spoilers for each season in that season's section. Additionally, when there either is or is not additional seasons, I will record my overall section of the video and post that. But anyway, let's get started. First, I want to take a minute to talk about my data collection. So, I watched every episode of Fargo and recorded every death, focusing on the murder deaths, but including all of them and all of the crimes. Only on-screen deaths or bodies shown at the crime scenes or in the morgue were recorded. Also, sometimes there are quick surprise massacres where you only see the shooters and not really the victims. That would be left off since there's a large number of criminals and often an unknown number of victims. However, if there's a massacre and the specific number of victims is said later, such as in season 1, or maybe such as in a different part of season 4, they pan over all the bodies and I'm able to count them, then they are included. The number of victims was recorded as an other victim, which is a victim of any crime except for murder, or a murder victim. Only the gender of murder victims were recorded, either as male, female, or unknown. Every murder and crime was categorized and the criminal was recorded, and the ratings were taken from IMDb at the time of viewing and are all out of 10. So the crimes that I recorded were murder, abduction, attempted murder, mayhem, sexual assault, and other. The sub-crimes, or the causes of death, were shooting, stabbing, bludgeoning, drowning, asphyxiation, poison, and fire. For the attempted murder, it's all the same as the murder category. Just put the word attempted in front of it. So attempted murder was not recorded for any police characters who shot at a criminal but did not kill them. In this data, it only applies to people who attacked someone with the express intent to kill them and also hit them. If they didn't hit them, then it doesn't count. However, if a specific named police or FBI person kills someone, they go on the criminal graph. And the mayhem definition from dictionary.law.com, it is, quote, the criminal act of disabling, disfiguring, or cutting off or making useless one of the members, leg, arm, hand, foot, eye, of another either intentionally or in a fight, called maiming. And other is generally something that is illegal but is really specific. I don't know what you would call it, or it just happened once. And this is always my favorite slide, the things that are probably illegal but were not recorded as crimes. Those things are filling a grocery store with crickets, evading police, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, those kind of things, illegal possession of firearms, bringing a gun to school, stun, caning, tasing, and macing, low-grade assaults such as punching, slapping, kicking, or two-way fights, breaking and entering, blackmail and fraud, taking boy you have no guardianship over on spontaneous road trip because everyone else thinks he's dead, squatting, anything booby trap related, spousal or child abuse unless it reaches attempted murder or mayhem levels, in which case I obviously record it, and whatever you call Roy's militia thing, because I could not think of what that was called. Yeah, Roy's militia thing in season 5 is not included in any crime graphs, but remember, he did do that. Finally, for each season, I will give you what I believe to be the crimiest episode, which is the episode with the most crimes and deaths, but not necessarily the deadliest episode. And for all intents and purposes, stabbing includes the sharp end of an axe, glass shards, arrows, which is just long-distance stabbing, and knives. And for all intents and purposes, poisoning includes actual poison, such as arsenic, cyanide, etc., as well as misuse of substances to kill. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into season 1, Lester Nygaard. This is the season 1 criminal graph. Each color is a different criminal. This season really only had 4. But there was one instance of other criminals where a group of police officers shot and killed Don Chumph. I didn't record that as a name because it was a group of police officers, not one specific police officer. Anyway, as you can see, Lauren Mulver was responsible for a large number of the deaths and other victims. We also have Numbers and Wrench, Lester Nygaard, and Gus Grimley. Okay, then some quick statistics about this season. There were 39 total deaths, 36 of which were murders, 14 women, 13 men, and 19 unknown. And if you subtract the 22 victims of the Fargo, the Fargo Crime Syndicate Massacre, it's only 14 victims. The number of criminals is 5, not including police officers who shot Don Chumph. The total crimes by occurrence is 41 crimes across 5 types. Average rating is 8.89 out of 10. The standard deviation is 0.396, and the episode The 6 on Grass Bubbles is the only episode with no crimes. So some other information. So Gus, as a cop, did shoot Molly, thinking he was shooting the criminals. Dimitri died in a car accident. Lester died when he fell through thin ice. An unnamed man died of hypothermia after escaping Malvo's trunk. And there was a time skip from 2006 to 2007 towards the end of the season. And now let's break down those 39 deaths that we had. So, of the 39 deaths, 36 are murdered, with 22 dying in the Fargo Crime Syndicate Massacre. So 31 were shot, 2 were stabbed, 1 was bludgeoned, 1 was drowned, 1 was asphyxiated. The other 3 died of other causes, hypothermia, car accident, and drowning. And of the one attempted murder, one was shot. The Mayhems were a bear trap, and the others were dog murder. In these projects, I always include dog murders. I would include cat murders, but I actually have not come across that yet. But I put it under other because it's not like a human murder victim. And let's talk about each criminal in this season. So Lorne Malvo is a hitman. He has 32 total murder victims. However, I originally had this at 33 because in the final episode, it is unclear whose body he is dragging behind like a thing. It could be the man from the car that was kind of sent as a distraction, or it could be Budger Pepper. We don't really know. It was unclear, so I just decided to not include that as an extra murder victim and just assumed that the man from the car got away. Lauren Malvo had one other victim. He committed the crimes of murder, abduction, and dog murder, so he has 32 victims plus a dog. He committed crimes in 7 episodes out of 10 that season. He was killed when he was shot by Gus Grimley, and his deadliest episode is Who Shaves the Barber, when 22 people were shot and killed inside the Fargo crime syndicate building by Malvo. Lester Nygaard is a salesman with one murder victim and one other victim. He committed murder and mayhem. He committed crimes in 2 episodes out of 10, and he was not necessarily like killed, but he did fall through ice and drown. And his deadliest episode is the first one, The Crocodile's Dilemma, where he bludgeons his wife. Numbers and Wrench are hitmen with one total murder victim combined between them, and 2 other victims. The crimes committed were murder, abduction, and attempted murder. They committed crimes in 3 episodes out of 10, and were they killed? Yes and no. Numbers was stabbed by Malvo and died, while Wrench was caught and is one of— okay, I don't know why I put criminal in quotes, but he is one of 4 criminals that ended up in jail. Their deadliest episode is A Muddy Road, where Numbers and Wrench abducted the wrong man and threw him in an ice hole. And finally, Gus Grimley is a former cop slash current mailman with one total murder victim. He only committed that one murder. In that one episode, he is still alive, and he shot Lorne Malvo in the final episode of the season, Morton's Fork. Speaking of Morton's Fork, that is also the crimiest episode of this season, by my judgment. The crimes committed were 3 murders and 1 mayhem. The criminals were Lorne Malvo, Lester Nygaard, and Gus Grimley. The rating is 9.3, which is tied for the highest of the season. The deadliest episode is Who Shaves the Barber, with 22 murders. And the murder victims are Budge, Pepper, and Malvo. The mayhem victim is also Malvo, and the non-crime death is Lester. And we're on to season 2, which revolves around Ed and Peggy Blomquist. This is the season 2 criminal graph. As you can see, there's a lot more criminals this season. I'm not going to talk about all of them. But we had Hansi, Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers, miscellaneous Kansas City Mafia, Peggy and Ed Blomquist, Rye Gerhard, Bear Gerhard, Otto Gerhard, and Dodd Gerhard, and then the miscellaneous Gerhards. Because remember, in this season, we had 2 mafias, the Kansas City Mafia and the Gerhards. This season's quick statistics: the total deaths were 66, all of which were murders of 7 women, 59 men, and 0 unknown. 12 criminals, which does not include miscellaneous gang members from both sides or kind of like unnamed miscellaneous cops who killed a total of 3 during the Sioux Falls Massacre. The total crimes by occurrence was 72 crimes across 4 types. The average rating is 8.88, which is actually just 0.01 lower than the average for season 1. And a standard deviation is slightly lower with 0.377, and every episode this season had a crime. And some other information. So, Hansi did kill Constance Heck, that is confirmed, but neither her death nor her body were ever shown, and so her death was not included since it was not on screen. That's my own definition. That's my own feeling for why it's not included. I'm just trying to be consistent, so I did not record Constance Heck's death. And this season took place in 1979 with no time skips. Okay, so let's break down this season's cause of death. So of the 66 deaths, 66 were murdered, and of that, 52 were shot, 10 were stabbed, 1 was buried alive, 1 was asphyxiated, 1 was drowned, and 1 was bludgeoned. And of the 2 attempted murders, 1 was shot, 1 was bludgeoned, and the mayhems were torture stabbing, torture shooting, and throwing boiling water in someone's face. First criminals this season are Peggy and Ed Blomquist, who are a hairdresser and a butcher's assistant respectively. They had combined 3 total murder victims and 2 other victims. They committed the crimes of murder, abduction, and mayhem. They committed crimes in 4 episodes out of 10. And were they killed? No one's yes. Peggy survived, but Ed was shot and killed by Hansi, and Peggy is the second of 4 criminals to end up in jail. I don't know why I keep putting criminal in quotes like that. And then the deadliest episode for Peggy and Ed Blomquist is tied between Waiting for Dutch and The Gift of the Magi. In the first one, Peggy hit Rye, and then Ed cleaved the guy. So Dodd Gerhard is a member of the Gerhard crime family with 4 total murder victims and no other victims. He only committed murder in 4 episodes out of 10, and he was killed when he was shot by Hansi after the Blomquist abducted him, and he has no deadliest episode since it's a 4-way tie. He murdered 1 person in each of those 4 episodes. Otto Gerhardt is another member of the Gerhard crime family. He also had 4 total murder victims and no other victims, but he committed those murders in 1 episode out of 10. He was killed when he was shot through a window by members of the Kansas City Mafia, And his deadliest episode is Fear and Trembling, when he shot those 4, but possibly 5 people in a flashback to 1951. Then we have Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers, who are members of the Kansas City Mafia. They have 11 total murder victims between them, and no other victims. They committed murder in 4 episodes out of 10. Were they killed? No and yes. Milligan and one Kitchen Brother survived, and the other had his throat cut by Hansi. And their deadliest episode is Did You Do This? No, You Did That, where they killed 6 Gerhards by various methods. And then we have Hansi, who is a member of the Gerhard crime family. He had 16 total murder victims, 3 other victims, and he committed murder, mayhem, and attempted murder. He committed crimes in 4 episodes out of 10, and he was not killed because he leaves under a new name. His deadliest episode is The Castle, where he killed 7 people in the Sioux Falls Massacre and a gas station attendant and tried to kill Hank Larson. The miscellaneous Gerhards are just miscellaneous members of the Gerhard crime family who had 9 murder victims, and they only committed murder in 3 episodes out of 10. It can't really say if they were killed because these are unnamed people, but probably some died in the Sioux Falls Massacre. And the deadliest episode is The Gift of the Magi, where they ambushed and killed 4 members of the Kansas City Mafia. And then the miscellaneous Kansas City Mafia had 6 total murder victims in 1 episode out of 10. Again, unknown number killed. Deadliest episode was The Gift of the Magi, where during the ambush they fired and killed 6 Gerhards. Bear Gerhard is a member of the Gerhard crime family with 3 murder victims and 1 other victim. He committed murder and attempted murder in 2 episodes out of 10. He was killed by Lou Solverson during the Sioux Falls Massacre, and his deadliest episode is The Castle, where he shot 2 people and tried to strangle Lou. Now, obviously, this season revolves around the lead up to the Sioux Falls Massacre, making the deadliest episode the penultimate one, The Castle, which had 19 murders, 2 attempted murders, and 1 mayhem. The criminals are Hansi, Ricky G, Bear Gerhard, miscellaneous Gerhards, Hank Larson, other, Lou Solverson, and Peggy and Ed Blomquist. The rating is 9.4, which is tied for the highest of this season, as well as being the highest so far overall. It is also the deadliest episode of the season, and the murdered victims are the gas station attendant Floyd Dodd and 16 others in the massacre, and the attempted murder of Lou Solverson, and the mayhem of Hansi. Alright, now we're on to season 3, which revolved around Emmett and Ray Stussy. Okay, this is season 3 criminal graph. As you can see, we're back to a lower number of criminals compared to season 2, but still more than season 1. The criminals were Mimo and Yuri, Gurka, and Gollum, kind of together. They were always together. Wes Wrench from season 1 returns. Nikki Swango, VM Varga, Maurice LeFay, Thaddeus Mobley, Emmett Stussy, and Officer Crowley. So some quick statistics. There were 22 total deaths, all of which were murders of 2 women and 20 men. There were 10 criminals. There were no, other criminals this season. The total crimes by occurrence were 27 crimes across 3 types. The average rating was 8.38 out of 10, with a standard deviation of 0.326, which is even lower than the first 2 seasons. And the episode The Principle of Restricted Choice had no crimes. So some other information. It is said that Irv was thrown off a bridge by Yuri and Mimo, but this is never seen nor mentioned further. I was confused by that, so I didn't do anything with it. Because again, it was never seen. And they never found his body, so... Anyway, no abductions took place this season. I thought that was interesting. Mimo, Yuri, and Gollum caused a bus to crash that killed an unknown amount of prisoners, and these deaths are not included because, again, unknown number, but they did also commit that crime. This took place around Christmas 2010, then jumped to March 2011, and finally 5 years later to around 2016. And Hitman Wes Wrench is brought back from season 1. Now let's break down the causes of those 22 deaths. 22 were murdered, 12 were shot, 5 were stabbed, 3 were asphyxiated, 1 was killed by falling objects, intentionally, it's not an accident, and 1 was manslaughtered with a glass shard. Of the 5 attempted murders, 2 were bludgeoned, 2 were stabbed, and 1 was poisoned. Also, there were no others or mayhems in this season, but there was 1 instance of sexual assault. And the first criminal is Nikki Swango, who is just, we don't really know what her job is other than criminal. She has 4 total murder victims and no other victims. She only committed murder in 2 episodes out of 10. She was killed when she was shot by Officer Crowley in the same instant that she shot him. And her deadliest episode is Somebody to Love, where she possibly killed 2 people outside of a building and killed Officer Crowley. I say possibly because 2 people died and they were probably killed by her. And then Mimo and Yuri Gurka and Gollum are assassins with 7 murder victims and 3 other victims. The crimes committed are murder and attempted murder. They committed crimes in 3 episodes out of 10. All 3 of them were killed. Gollum was bled out by Wrench, Yuri was decapitated by Wrench and Nikki, and Mimo was shot by Wrench. The latest episode is Who Rules the Land of Denial, where they killed a couple, a guard, and 2 hunters. And then VM Varga is a con artist with no murder victims, but 2 other victims. He committed attempted murder and sexual assault in 2 episodes out of 10, and he was not killed. He escaped to Belgium under the name Daniel Rand, but did get caught. and he has no deadliest episode since he had Mimo, Yuri, and Gollum to do his bidding and murder. Emmett Stussy is a real estate agent with one murder victim, no other victims, and he only committed that one murder in one episode, that's supposed to say out of 10. He was shot and killed by Wes Wrench, and his deadliest episode is The Lord of No Mercy, where Emmett killed his brother Ray. And back to Wes Wrench, who is a hitman. In this season, he had 8 total murder victims. In season 1, he had 1 murder victim who he killed with numbers. He committed crimes in 2 episodes out of 10. And he was not killed. Is still one of the criminals to end up in jail. And his deadliest episode is Somebody to Love, where he killed 5 people, including Mimo, in a building, and then he killed Emmett 5 years later. This season's crimiest episode is Who Rules the Land of Denial, with 7 murders and 3 attempted murders. And the criminals are Mimo, Yuri, Gollum, Wrench, and VM Varga. The rating is 8.9, which is the highest of the season. The deadliest episode, by comparison, is Somebody to Love, with 10 murders, and the victims are a passerby couple, 2 hunters, Guard, Yuri, and Gollum, and the attempted murders of Wrench and Nikki. And now on to season 4, which revolves around Loy Cannon and is another kind of like mafia season. I will say, in my experience recording data for crime shows, it is a little more confusing when there's mafias involved because I have to put like the miscellaneous categories. Also, it took me like way longer to get through this season than the other ones because I had to go back to school after winter break. So this one was a lot more confusing than the other ones. This is season 4 criminal graph. We do have quite a few criminals, and again, not going to go through all of them, but we do have Swanee and Selmare, miscellaneous cannons, Constant Calamita, Gaetano Fada, Orietta Mayflower, miscellaneous Fadas, Opal Rackley, Josto Fada, Joe Bulo, Rabbi Milligan, Otis Weff, Loy Cannon, and Omi Sparkman. Some quick statistics for this season. This season had 67 total deaths, which beats season 2 by just 1. However, this season only had 64 murders of 15 women, 49 men, and 0 unknown. The number of criminals was 12, which does not include miscellaneous cannons or miscellaneous fadas, and the total crimes by occurrence was 68 crimes across 4 types. The average rating was 7.42 with a standard deviation of 0.24, so the lowest standard deviation, but also the lowest rating, and every episode this season had crimes. So, some other information for this season. In the first episode, 2 massacres occurred in the 1920s and 1930s, but it is unknown and also unshown how many died, so it could not be recorded. Several other massacres occur throughout, in which case I just recorded all of the deaths or bodies shown. Because of the time period, anyone obviously wearing a skirt was recorded as female, and the rest as male, so there weren't any unknowns. But again, that's just because, it's the 50s. Rabbi Milligan and Constant Calamita both die in a tornado, and Gaetano Fada tripped, setting off his gun and shooting himself in the head. And this season takes place in 1951 with no time skips. Of the 67 deaths this season, 64 were murdered, with 59 shot, 2 poisoned, 1 stabbed, 1 killed by fire, 3 others died of natural causes. 2 were tornadoed, and 1 died in a gun accident. Of the 5 attempted murders, 3 were shot and 2 were poisoned. Other this season was armed robbery. I normally wouldn't record that in one of these projects, but I was a pretty major plot point, so I did record it. The first criminal we have is Rabbi Milligan, who is a member of the Fada crime family. He has 4 total murder victims and 0 other victims. He committed only murder in 2 episodes out of 10. He was not technically killed, but he did get tornadoed, so he did die. And his deadliest episode is tied between Welcome to the Alternate Economy and Camp Elegance, both with 2. However, the former's murders were both committed in flashbacks, because that's the first episode. Now, the thing about every season of this show is that generally there is a character who could be considered a hitman. And this season does not actually have one. The closest we have is a serial killer in Orietta Mayflower. Her occupation is a nurse. She has 2 total murder victims. It is shown that she has many more before the season started, but she killed 2 on screen. She has 2 other victims. She committed the crimes of murder and attempted murder in 4 episodes out of 11. And she is killed when she was shot by Joe Bulo alongside Josto. Her deadliest episode is tied between Welcome to the Alternate Economy and Camp Elegance, where she killed a patient in each. And then the miscellaneous Fadas are Fada crime family members with 4 murder victims in 2 episodes out of 11. Some of them probably got killed eventually, but again, don't know because they're unnamed. The deadliest episode is The Land of Taking and Killing, where 3 were killed in a drive-by shooting. Constant Calamita is a Fada crime family member with 4 murder victims and 2 other victims. He committed murder and attempted murder. He committed crimes in 3 episodes out of 11, and he also got tornadoed, so not like killed in the murdered sense, but he is dead. And his deadliest episode is tied between The Birthplace of Civilization and East West, where 2 were killed in each. And Swanee and Zelmare are robbers with 28 murder victims, a lot higher than you'd think for robbers, but they have no other victims. They committed the crimes of murder and other, the other being armed robbery. They committed crimes in 4 episodes out of 11. Were they killed? Yes and no. Swanee was shot in the head by Duffy, and Zelmare lived. Their deadliest episode is The Nadir, where I counted 23 dead bodies shown after they pulled out machine guns. Opal Rackley is a canon limited member with 2 murder victims, no other victims. He committed murder in 2 episodes out of 11. He is not killed, and he technically didn't have a deadliest episode since it's tied between the Pretend War and Storia Americana, where he killed 1 in each episode. Gaetano Fada is a Fada crime family member with 6 murder victims, no other victims. He committed murder in 4 episodes out of 11. He was killed when he tripped and set off his own gun, going through shooting himself in the head, and his deadliest episode is tied between the birthplace of the civilization and the Nadir, with 2 were killed in each. Lycanon is a mafia leader, but he has no murder victims and only 1 other victim. His crime committed was abduction in 2 episodes out of 11. He abducted Gaetano over the course of 2 episodes, so I only counted it as 1 abduction though. He was killed when he was stabbed by Zelmare, and he has no deadliest episode since he never killed anyone. Miscellaneous canons are obviously canon limited members. They have 7 murder victims and no other victims, committing murder in 2 episodes out of 11. Some probably died, and the deadliest episode is The Nadir, when 5 Fadas were killed in a shootout. Then Justo Fada is a Fada crime family member with 2 murder victims, no other victims. He committed murder in 1 episode out of 11. He was shot and killed by Joe Bulo alongside Orietta. His deadliest episode is Storia Americana, where he killed Dr. Harvard and Milvin Gillis after going off the rails. Finally, Joe Bulo is a member of the Kansas City Mafia with 2 total murder victims and no other victims. Committed murder in 1 episode out of 11. I don't know why that keeps getting cut off there. He was not killed in season 4. He lives well into the 1970s. Deadliest episode is Storia Americana, when he killed Justo and Orietta. Okay, I was about to talk about the crimiest episode, but I didn't record the counts for the crime, so I went back to my Excel sheet, and I accidentally recorded an attempted murder as a murder, so now we're back to this slide. Because there were only 66 deaths, which means this is actually tied with season 2, which means there were only 63 murders of 15 women and 48 men. Everything else remains the same. There are still 68 crimes across 4 types. The one I got wrong was Swanee and Zelmer. They actually have 27 murder victims and 1 other victim because they committed attempted murder. I don't remember the context of this, but in the episode Camp Elegance, the first note I have there just says, killed an unknown number, shot Gaetano in the head. But that's not the episode where Gaetano died, so I don't remember that. I do not remember that. But I guess that happened, and that was an attempted murder that I totally messed up in recording. Back to the crimiest episode, Camp Elegance, 1 attempted murder, 4 murders, and 1 abduction. The criminals are Swanee and Zelmare, Gaetano, Orietta, Rabbi, and Loy. The rating is 7.4, which is not the highest, not the lowest of the season, kind of in the middle. The deadliest episode in comparison is the Nadir, and murdered were Paolo Antundumini, a Fada man, and a hospital patient, attempted murder of Gaetano, and abduction of Gaetano. And now we're on to season 5, which revolves around Dorothy Lyon. This is season 5 criminal graph. It's much like season 1 in that there are only 4 criminals, but this season has the least number of criminals because there weren't even any other criminals to record. There was no reason to record that. However, it is worth noting, Roy has a bunch of cronies, which includes Gator. Gator has his own cronies. There were like 4 people who tried to help him abduct Dot. None of them are recorded. None of them are recorded, but also none of them were even like successful in abducting Dot, so there's that. Anyway, I'm pretty sure his name is Ulamunk, so I'm gonna say Ulamunk and hope that's right. Roy Tillman, Dot, and Gator. Some quick statistics. This is the least deadly season, which I guess makes it the liviest season because people lived a lot. All of the 19 deaths were murders of only 1 woman and 18 men. There were 4 criminals, which again does not include Gator's cronies or the FBI. The total crimes by occurrence were 29 crimes across 5 types. The average rating was 8.25 out of 10, with a standard deviation of 0.34. The Paradox of Intermediate Transactions and The Tiger both had no crimes. However, in The Tiger, Dot does attack people, but I don't really record those like, kind of attacking people crimes. So for some other information, this season takes place in 2019, with the last part happening in 2020. And just an observation, but this season is the only one where the first episode was the crimiest, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The only season where none of the criminals died, only one of the main police and FBI characters died. It had the fewest total deaths and the least criminals, which again does not include cronies. But I just found that very interesting. Like, this is the least murdery season, but I think it's the crimiest overall. There's just a lot of crime. And however, I say it's least deadly with only 19 murders, but during the standoff shootout at the end of the last episode, an unknown number of background people died off screen. The wiki says 3, but since they were off screen, and I don't really know who they were, or like if they were like Roy's men or FBI guys, None of them were recorded. Also, during Dot's second abduction attempt, I already mentioned this, but Gator was aided by 4 other people, one of whom was a woman, and but none of these 4 were counted. And similarly, during the first abduction, Ula was aided by a man named Donnie, who was also not counted. The way I record these crimes does get a little confusing when you have someone who's aided by someone else for like one crime. But in those cases, I tend to just like record whoever the like bigger main criminal is. Okay, let's break down the 19 deaths. So 19 were murdered, 9 were shot, 4 were stabbed, 2 were bludgeoned, and 1 was unknown. The unknown one is there's an episode where Ula Moonk breaks into Roy's house covered in like mud and blood, and then at the start of the next episode, when Roy gets there, there's a dead man on his porch. We don't know how he died. And based on based on Moonk, he's got like so many different ways of murdering people that I couldn't really guess either. He could have been strangled, could have been stabbed. I doubt he was shot. Could have been any number of things, but that I just left it as unknown. 0 died of other causes, and of the 2 attempted murders, 2 were shot. There was an attempted abduction. That was the other, because again, and normally I wouldn't record an attempted abduction, but it was just such a big chunk of the episode and it's such a major plot point that I did ultimately record it. Any mayhems were a flamethrower to the face, ice skating an ear off, chopping an ear off with an ice skate, breaking an arm slash deafening, and enucleation, which is the fancy word for taking someone's eyes out. And additionally, there were 3 abductions, dot again, but that second one was over 2 episodes and it was only counted once, and the guy who wasn't Wayne, but they thought he was Wayne. So the first of our 4 criminals. So Dorothy Lyon is a stay-at-home mom with 1 murder victim. She had 3 other victims. Her crimes were murder and mayhem. She committed crimes in 2 episodes out of 10. And she was not killed, but she was beat up pretty badly. And her deadliest episode was The Tragedy of the Commons, which is the first one, when Dot hit Donnie on the head with a bag of ice. He fell backwards, hit his head on a toilet, and died. Ulamunk is a hitman with 9 total murder victims and 4 other victims. He committed the crimes of murder, abduction, attempted murder, and mayhem. He's so far the only person to hit all 4 of those. He's actually the only person to have 4 at all. And he committed crimes in 5 episodes out of 10. He was not killed, but he might be immortal, so it might also be impossible to kill him. That was kind of unclear. His deadliest episode is The Tragedy of the Commons, first one, where he killed an officer, killed an attendant, abducted Dot, and shot Whitfar. Gator Tillman is a deputy with 1 murder victim and 1 other victim, committed the crimes of murder and other in 2 episodes out of 10, and he was not killed, but he was enucleated. Additionally, Gator is the 3rd of 4 criminals to end up in jail. His deadliest episode is Linda, where similar to Dot's murder charge, he killed the old lady by hitting her on the head and making her fall backwards, where she hit her head on the curb and died. And finally, Roy Tillman is a sheriff with 5 murder victims and 1 other victim, committed the crimes of murder and abduction in 5 episodes out of 10. He did not die, but Dot did shoot him in the stomach. And Roy is the 4th of 4 criminals to end up in jail at the end of the season. His deadliest episode is Bisquick, where Roy stabbed his father-in-law and Whitfar, killing them both. As I mentioned, this season's crimiest episode is actually the first one, The Tragedy of the Commons, where there were 3 murders, 2 mayhems, 1 abduction, and 1 attempted murder. The criminals were Dot and Ulamunk. The rating is 8.6, which is the 2nd highest of the season. The deadliest episode is also The Tragedy of the Commons, and the murder victims were Donnie, an officer, and the gas station attendant. Dot was abducted. The attempted murder of Whitfar and mayhemed were Donnie and Ulamunk. And now we're going to talk about the movie, but I want to take a second and show you how I recorded this since it's not a show, so I couldn't record it by episode. So this is my Excel sheet for Fargo. But I used timestamps, so I could only see time remaining, so that's what that is. I was watching it on HBO Max, so I guess it's like, the runtime of it on HBO Max. But I recorded it kind of like by scene, so when one action starts and another action stops, I recorded that and I put a little note of like trying to describe really briefly just what that scene is. I recorded, I believe, 48 of those sequences. Anyway, the IMDb rating is 8.1 out of 10. And the quick statistics for the movie are that there were 7 deaths, all of which were murders of 2 women and 5 men. The number of criminals was 4, which does not include Marge. The total crimes by occurrence were 10 crimes across 3 types, and from about 33 minutes to about an hour and 5 minutes is the longest stretch with no violence. So the other information for this movie is that Jerry orchestrated the kidnapping but did not actually commit it himself, so he is not recorded for that. Marge shot Garrett in the leg as he fled. It takes place in 1987, and although I did not record assaults in the show, I did in the movie, since it's a movie and there was only 1 incident of that, and there's not a whole lot of crimes happening. Also, Fargo is notable for having a pregnant character that never gives birth, and of the 48 sequences I recorded, Marge's pregnancy is only referenced in 4 sequences. Around 36 minutes via morning sickness, around an hour when talking with Jerry, a couple minutes later when dining with Mike, and about an hour and a half in at the end of the movie when in bed with Norm at the end. This is the movie criminal graph. As you can see, there are only 4 criminals. We have Gary Grimsrud, Carl Showalter, Shep Proudfoot, and Wade Gustafson. Should be noted that Carl and Gary's other victims are the same person. That's both Gene. And if we look at Carl Showalter, his occupation is crook. He has 2 total murder victims, which is about 30% of all the murder victims in the movie. He has 1 other victim, Jean, when he abducted her, and he committed crimes in 2 sequences out of 48. And he was killed when he was axed by Gare and then wood chippered. His deadliest sequence is from an hour 9:19 to an hour 11:53. And in about 3 minutes, Carl kills Wade and the parking lot attendant. And then Gare Grimsrud is a crook with 5 murder victims, the remaining 70% of all the murder victims in the movie. He has 1 other victim. He committed the crimes of murder and abduction. He committed crimes in 4 sequences out of 48, and he was not killed. He was arrested by Marge. Anyway, his deadliest sequence is from 31:09 to 32:53 when he trails the couple in the car and shoots both. Shep Proudfoot is a mechanic with no murder victims, but 3 other victims because he committed assault in 1 sequence. He attacked 3 people from an hour 6:37 to an hour 7:53. Also, my extremely specific note for that sequence is Shep attacks Carl and the guy and the girl. So, it's that part of the movie. And finally, Wade Gustafson is a real estate developer with 0 murder victims, 1 other victim. He only committed attempted murder in 1 sequence. He was killed when he was shot by Carl, and his deadly sequence, not deadly, but he did shoot Carl in the face in the parking garage at 1:09:19 to 1:11:53. The crimiest sequence in this movie is 25:29 to 32:53 when there are 3 murders, all committed by Gary Grimsrud. It is the deadliest sequence, and murdered are the state trooper and the couple. I couldn't find a picture of this scene, but on this movie poster, it's like the part where this happens at night. Like, this is the day. It's the night before when this happens. Anyway, so that is the end of my season by season data breakdown of the show Fargo and the movie Fargo. As I said, I will eventually record like an overall thing, like an overall video when it is announced that either there will be a 6th season or that the show is done forever. And, I'll make videos for any future seasons. So subscribe to my channel if you want to get a notification about that video. I also have several other data analysis videos for crime shows. But thanks for watching.